On the following page, 3547, in the center of the page, he says, I know that the instructions, the following page, 3547, in the center, the second passage, I know that instructions, that the information passed through the director of office number 4 to the Eichmann group 4B4. The witness was asked who was Eichmann, and the answer was Eichmann was in command of group 4B4, which dealt with all Jewish problems. Later he was asked, does he know that Eichmann held his department and had the order for the extermination? He said he learned about that only after the downfall. When he continues and says, Noske continues, that Eichmann had a special complex of buildings and no one could trespass. He himself could not enter into Eichmann's offices. At the foot of page 3548, the question is, did this unit, was it hermetically sealed? And the answer on page 3549, it was known only that instructions came directly from the head of the office or from Hitler himself.
Judge Lando, that he had obtained, it says, doesn't it?
On pages 3554, again, the question of the Einsatzgruppen reports, which were sent to Eichmann directly, and that his group was within the plan itself, right in the core of this plan. In the very core of this plan.
I understand. The focal point of this, the center of this. $3,556. The witness says that up to April 1942, 41A department centralized, and later only Eichmann's department received reports regarding Jewish matters. Judge Landau, who was this Noske?
Noske was a man of the security police. He identifies himself at the beginning of his testimony. He headed the Operation Group 12. Later, he would centralize all the reports of the Einsatzgruppen in the central office of the Reich Security. On page 3557, again, he tells about the special Eichmann office, and again repeats that the complex was very special, sealed, separated from all other departments.
Judge Landau, no, I think it's a different version here. It says something different. Here on 3557, I see... Oh, I'm sorry, this is Heydrich. I see. And where is this passage?
Das war von meinem Dienstsitz schätzungsweise 8 Kilometer entfernt.
Where was Eichmann? The question. The answer, he was on Kurfürstenstrasse. How far from your office? Some 8 kilometers from my office.
And he says the offices were scattered.
But he had a separate unit. He headed a complex of buildings and offices, and he received instructions of the Einsatzgruppen. In part, I already brought to the court those orders, and I shall submit further details of those orders to the court.
Ich werde auf dieses Dokument später zurückkommen. Ich würde jetzt nur bitten, ob der Herr Generalstaatsanwalt mir sagen kann, ob der Zeuge noch lebt, weil ich ihn dann als Zeuge gerne vernehmen möchte.
Dr. Savatius, I shall refer to this document later, but now I should like to ask whether the Attorney General could tell me whether this witness, Noske, is still alive. If so, I would very much like to examine him as a witness.
I do not know, but I shall find out and let the counsel for the defense know. We know that he was brought to trial, but I do not know what happened to him.
Judge Landau, was he the accused in this
he
trial?
was a witness, but later he was accused. I have here a list of men accused of crimes against humanity in the Jewish Congress of 1961. Noske is here described as Sonderkommando 7B of Einsatzkommando B. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, and then the judgment was mitigated to 10 years, and it seems he was released on the 31st of January, 51. I do not know if he's still alive.
Judge Landau, could you try to find out, sir?
I will try to find out. Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Es erscheint mir wertvoll, den Zeugen zu hören, denn wenn man dieses Schriftstück durchsieht, dann stellt man fest, dass der vernehmende Richter Bedenken hatte, die aussahen, als glaubhaft anzunehmen. Er stellt verschiedene Fragen, was sich bei der Lektüre des Dokuments ergibt.
Dr. Savatius, it would seem to me that an examination of this witness would be of value, because when one examines this document, one sees that the examining magistrate or judge had doubts about the reliability of this evidence. This transpires from this document. Yes, Judge Landau, yes. Well, we've heard that Dr. Savatius will try to find out. Mr. Hausner also will try to find out whether this Noske is still alive. Yes, thank you very much.
I call upon Avraham Aviel, A-V-I-E-L, Abraham Aviel.
תזכירי לי בהפסקה, אני רוצה משהו בנוגע לטכניקה בהפסקה, על סמך מה שהיה אתמול משהו.
הוא התייאש.
אני חושב שבחנו אותו, אמר יש לו סיבות.
מה?
הוא אמר לי, I have special reasons to do this bit. נדמה לי שהיה מישהו למטה. היו תלונות ללשכת העיתונות וכל מיני דברים.
אני סגור.
היו כל מיני תלונות. Place your right hand on the Bible and say, I swear to God that my testimony in this trial will be the truth, nothing but the truth, and the whole truth. What is your full name? Avraham Aviel.
Aleph Bet Yud Aleph Lamed.
Aleph Bet Yud Aleph Lamed.
A-V-I-E-L.
You live in Tel Aviv, Halevanon Street, 23.
I do.
You are a clerk.
I am.
Born in Poland.
I was.
In a village near to Radom, R-A-D-O-M.
Correct.
Where is that? What district?
And it's in the Lida district.
Will you please tell the court where the Lida district is?
It's in the Novogrodok district, between Grodno and Vilna. That's the exact location.
What is the name of the village you were born in?
Dugalishok.
Is it a Jewish village? Farmers, Jewish farmers?
Yes, Jewish farmers. They subsisted only on agriculture.
When the Germans entered, they drove you away of the out of the village into Radom ghetto.
Yes, to Radon.
When was that?
That was in the Hebrew month of Cheshvan, 1941, approximately September, October.
Judge Halevi, what year were you born?
I was born in 1927.
In the ghetto, you used to go out to work, to chop wood.
We were cleaning roads, wiping the snow off the roads.
Food ration was small, but the farmers would help you to get hold of more food.
Well, we had reserves because it was a farming district. Every Jew had some reserves, considerable reserves of basic foods, and they kept this for time of need. We had rations of about 120 grams of bread a day. I can't recall any extra rations. It was impossible to subsist on these rations, but we used these reserves, and when we went out to work, we would meet other farmers, and this way we could always manage to bring home a bit of bread, other types of food, lentils perhaps.
And the authorities confiscated silver, gold, warm clothes. I shall not tire the court. We already heard the story from other witnesses, and I shall pass now to the work of the Einsatzgruppen. Tell the court what happened after Hanukkah that same year.
One day, suddenly, a group of Germans arrived. They wore special uniforms. They came from Lida. They were on motorcycles. They went from house to house and were searching for people who were non-local residents. And they did find about 40 Jewish refugees who had been living for quite some time in Radon. They took them outside of town, up on a hill, about 1.5 kilometers out of the town. We heard shots immediately. Thereupon, a few moments later, they returned and gave instructions that we had to go out and bury these men. I was among these people. We had been living at the edge of the ghetto, near that hill. We were driven out there, and we buried these bodies, and that was the first time when I'd ever seen so much Jewish blood spilled. It was very cold then, there was frost, the ground was frozen almost like snow, and there was some snow too.
What happened later on the 7th of May 1942?
All that time, inside the ghetto, we were permitted to move around freely, but we were prohibited from leaving the ghetto confines. It was very dangerous, but inside the ghetto there was freedom of movement. On that night of the 7th of May, when we got up in the morning, we saw the ghetto was closed off. No one could go out, neither could one go out to work. Even those who had special passes could not leave. This came very suddenly. We had not anticipated it. We were kept this way inside the ghetto on this Thursday, then Friday, Saturday on the Sabbath too, and then on Sunday morning, the very early hours of the morning, a group of Jews was picked up. Most of them were young people, of strong people who could work, about 100. They were given spades. I remember these were special spades with long handles for digging. They were equipped with these tools and were ordered to march. The direction was towards Grodno, that is to the west.
Was there any member of your family in that group?
My father was in that group. I ran after him and I managed to see the entire group. After about half an hour, we heard shots. Automatic weapons were firing. We sensed that something had happened. We did not know exactly what it was that had happened, whether they had been killed or perhaps they may have escaped. It only transpired later.
And later you met your father again.
Yes, I did.
Will you please continue?
Of course, we knew what was in store for us, misfortunes, but there was nothing we could do.
Did you first try to smuggle your little brother?
Yes, on the Sabbath, the entire family knew, father knew that something was in the air, and he tried as best he could to escape, to flee. He could not do that alone. He did not want to leave the family behind. He sent my little brother. Judge Landau, you may sit down, sir, naturally.
If you sit down, maybe it will be easier for you.
He gave him the outfit of a shepherd. He looked like an Aryan. He was blonde. We thought we would disguise him as a peasant's boy.
What was his name?
Yekutiel was his name.
Did he succeed?
He managed to leave the ghetto. However, later he was captured, and the collaborators, the policemen, there were collaborators mobilized by the Germans.
Jews?
No, they were not Jews. They were Belarusians, White Russians, Poles. And they tried to identify him and see whether he was a Jew or a non-Jew. He spoke Polish well. They took off his pants, his trousers, and they saw that he was a Jew indeed, and he was returned. We saw that everything was sealed off, because then we thought, if a little boy could leave, we, the bigger ones, could then leave in a group, or perhaps only one of us would survive. And thus we were stuck there until the next day when father was sent to dig these graves. We knew that the moment father would stay alone, would be left alone, he would try to flee, because then he was not attached to the family, he would not have the responsibility. And indeed, as he later told me, when I met him, when they arrived at this place outside of town and the Germans tried to direct him to the field, he started shouting, "Scatter!" And part of the Jews took their spades and picked up rocks, and some of them managed to flee. Another part was killed. Others did not have the strength to run. They just stayed put.
And then you met your father in the wood.
And then I met my father in the woods.
We shall come to this chapter later.
Half an hour after we had heard these shots,
of that first group,
which came from the first group where father was at that time, they took another group, a second group. This included my bigger brother, Pinchas. I wanted to join him. Because the family was no longer intact, we thought perhaps there would be an opportunity when we leave town, there will be open spaces we could perhaps run. And if not, maybe it would be better to be killed, shot in the back while fleeing. But there was some hope, perhaps maybe father managed to escape. Because we knew what his way of thinking was. But I was not taken into that group. I was driven off. I was told that I was too small. And thus I stayed back. I stayed home with my mother, my little brother, other relatives, neighbors, while my bigger brother marched out with that spade in his hand.
How old was your brother at the time? Question by President of Court. And you are 14.
He was about 16 and myself 14.
Your brother Pinchas.
That was my brother Pinchas, yes. A few hours went by. These were hours of tension and fear. We did not know what to do. I was then the biggest one remaining at home. I tried to hide my smaller brother and my mother and the other people who were with us in the house. I tried to hide them in the attic. I covered them with rags and boxes. Then I went down and I thought, I tried to find out what was happening. As soon as I went down from that attic, I heard terrible noise. Motorcycles were coming in. There were shouts.
Who came on those motorcycles?
Germans came in from the direction of Lida in battle uniform, equipped with automatic weapons, like as if they were marching out to the front. It was a different uniform than what we had seen before. They had about the same uniform as that very first group had when they killed those 40 people. And I left the house and I saw a great mass of Jews being pushed from the edge of the ghetto, being driven on in the direction of Grodno, the same direction where these groups with the spades had been going. And we knew something awful would happen. At that moment, a number of Germans entered our house. One of them stood at the entrance, blocked the entrance. The others scattered in the rooms and began searching and began driving out people who were not yet in hiding. Whoever would pass through the entrance would absorb a blow from a rubber baton on his head, and he would fall down right there. When I saw that, I wanted to avoid being beaten this way. I ducked, and I jumped out, and I managed not to receive this blow.
And you joined the big mass.
And I joined that mass of people who were marched in that direction towards Grodno.
Continue, tell the court.
I mixed with that multitude. I tried to stop along the way to see whether I could find out what would happen to my family, whether they had been found out or not. I thought if I was on the edge, perhaps I could see them coming and I could join them. Unfortunately, however, I saw my mother, my small brother and uncle and other Jews included in the group of those people who were found out, and my little brother then told me later that they were beaten severely, and then we marched together in that direction where we were driven.
On the way, other Jews joined you?
Other Jews joined us. They would just be driven out of the homes along the way.
How many were you finally?
Oh, about 1,000, perhaps 1,100.
How many were there altogether in Radom?
In Radom there were about 2,000 people. They included about 1,000 of the indigenous population who were there before the war, and the rest, the other 1,000, were refugees. Some of them had come from the Eichmann ghettos, Aran, Kinik, people who had managed to escape from the Lithuanian area.
So you walked 1,000 men, 1,000 people.
Yes, I was near my mother. We worked with these children.
Mother in the center, and you and your brothers on her sides.
That's how it was. I was on her right, my little brother on her left. That's how we proceeded.
What did Mother say?
She said, say Shema Israel, recite the prayer of Shema Israel, we shall die as Jews.
And that is how they all walked, calling to their God.
That's
Shema
how it was.
Israel.
I repeated the words after her, but I had inner resistance. I did not do this willingly. We were brought to the marketplace in the middle of the town. We were told to kneel, heads down. We were not permitted to lift our heads. Whoever did so would either be shot right through the head or would be beaten. Of course, we saw from the corner of our eyes that people who tried to run away were shot right there. And then we sat there in the center of town. It took about an hour or more. I can't estimate this time. They lectured us. I didn't hear what was being said. My thoughts were all concentrated on the possibilities of escape. How could one get out of here, I thought. And then later we were all told to stand up, and we were led off out of town in the direction of the cemetery. The distance was about 1 kilometer in the direction of the graveyard. When we got there, approximately 100 yards from the cemetery, we were told to get off the road. Again, we had to kneel, heads down. We were not permitted to raise our heads or look aside. We only heard shots from the sides. And I was small then. I was shorter than the others. I could raise my head without being discovered. And I saw in front of me a long trench, about 25 yards long, maybe 30. They began leading us row after row, group after group. We were led to that trench. People were undressed. Then they would have to go on that little hill which was near the trench. Machine gun bursts were heard, and they would fall into the trench. And I saw one case of a Jewish girl who struggled. She did refuse to undress. They hit her, and then she was shot too.
Children,
women, family after family. The families were in groups together. At that moment, I noticed a group of Jews who were digging those graves. And knowing that my brother was in that group,
the second group.
That was the second group. We did not see the first group. We did not know what had happened to them.
What brother, Pinchas?
Yes, my brother Pinchas. I tried to find out whether he was alive, and I noticed him. He was there. At that moment, a desire arose within me to join him. because my thoughts, it was always my thought, one must survive, one must remain behind, one must survive, überleben, so he can tell what happened. I did not think for a long time. I took leave of my mother and I started jumping over the heads of these people who were sitting next to me. I jumped and fell down. I got up again. I didn't give a thought to what would happen. And thus, I don't really know how. I was not noticed. I was not discovered. It was a miracle, really. I managed to reach the edge of the road, near the canal, the ditch there. I lay down in the ditch, and they apparently did not notice me. Right next to me, Zelig Rostover. I found Zelig Rostover, the carpenter from our town. He had been employed by the Gestapo, and he had this pass, a special permit, that said that he had to be among those who survived. It was a labor pass, a special labor pass. I think there were altogether only about 10 people who had such passes. He held this card in his hand and wanted to go and take his family out of that big group. He saw them being led off. He wanted to get them out of that group. That moment he was approached by a German. He jabbed the revolver into his neck. I heard a shot. His face blackened. He still spoke for a second. He said, "I have a pass." He was shot again and he fell. It was about half a yard away from me. I stayed for a second. I stayed for a moment, then I crawled on towards the road. And I managed to reach the edge of that other group, those people who were digging the graves. At that moment, a German approached me too and asked me, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" I had a pass, as though I had been a locksmith. I said I was a good locksmith. I'm a blacksmith. And he left. Operation taken by partisans against the Gestapo. That was about 2 weeks after the mass slaughter, when Jewish boys, some of them are alive. In Haifa there is a boy who had taken part. It was not too distant from that trench. They made an ambush. They ambushed the gendarmes. The gendarmes were the Gestapo people. I think Kopka was the commander's name. And they wounded a few of the gendarmes, killed others. There was a Lithuanian too. Litka he was called. He was also one of the collaborators. He died in that battle. Later on the 10th of the Hebrew month of Cheshvan,
what year?
Still 1942, we wandered among the non-Jews, and we knew that we could not hold out much longer. Because generally one could say the population was sympathetic, particularly to us. They knew us from our village. It was in the same area. We were known as honest Jews. There were good relations with us. They were prepared to give us food. They gave us clothing, but we did not have need of that. We had our own clothing. Often we would sell clothes and buy food, but they would not take us into their homes. Only very few people did that. I stayed for some time with a non-Jew, a farmer, Yudovich. He kept us in his home several months. And I must stress this, that at that time Even Germans entered that house. I saw them. We thought he would turn us over, but he resisted that temptation. He withstood that trial. This was after my brother had already been killed.
President of court, what was this?
You say it was a trial. Why? What do you mean he withstood the trial? What was the temptation? Well, he may have been there was punishment. He could have been punished. He might have been killed if they had discovered Jews in his home. And of course, people were afraid in those situations. They were afraid to have Jews in their home. But there were others who did. And thus the three of us, my father, my brother Pinchas, and myself and my brother Pinchas went out to establish contact with the partisans. We went out into the dense forests. We knew that in this area we could not hold out. These were sparser woods. But in our village, near our home, it was in the middle of the night, about 1 a.m. Apparently someone had informed on us. People were waiting for us, Germans, about 20 or 23. They were in the corner near the house. There was a distance of about 1 yard, no more. We saw the muzzles of the rifles, but we did manage to run away. My brother and myself, I managed to run away. And I then decided to go to the Pushcha, to the thicker forest. There was a group of partisans, a serious group, a considerable group. It was started by the Jews. Then Russians joined us, Russians who came out of captivity and were among the farmers there. We had arms. We purchased these arms with good money. My father stayed in the vicinity of the village of Bialyshuk. He served as a courier. He could not walk too well. I set out with a group of 7 people. I came in there twice to try and get him out, but he did not want to walk. Only later, about 2 weeks later, I heard that all of them in that vicinity were killed. Again, informers were to blame.
And then you arrived by various ways to Russia, and from there to Hungary, then to Austria, and then to Yugoslavia, and from there to Italy. You tried to come to Palestine. You were driven to Cyprus, and from Cyprus to Israel.
That's how it was.
Radom was the town of the Chafetz Chaim.
It was the town of that sage, yes.
Dr. Servatius, any questions? I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Aviel. You are free.
Herr Präsident, darf ich einige Anträge noch übergeben?
Dr. Servatius, wish to submit.
Voilà.